Hello, dear friends. Today we'll take a closer look at what everyday life was really like for German submariners during the Second World War. If you've ever imagined a submarine as a sleek steel predator gliding through the ocean, forget the romance for a moment. For the men inside, a German U-boat was in many ways a slice of hell, a branch of hell. Cramped compartments, constant dampness, wet clothes and boots that never properly dried, stale air, strong smells, and all of it for weeks and months at a time. And the worst part, you couldn't simply step outside and breathe, but let's go step by step. Before leaving on a combat patrol, often lasting up to 12 weeks, a submarine had to be stuffed to the ceiling with everything needed to survive and fight. A boat could take aboard up to 14 tons of supplies, load a full ammunition stock, and fill its fuel tanks completely. In practice, that meant there was almost no free space left anywhere. Every corner, every gap, every unused surface became storage. Boxes and sacks were wedged into walkways. Food was tied down so it wouldn't shift, and even living areas were packed with supplies. For a new crewman, it could feel like stepping into a metal tunnel that had been filled with cargo until only a narrow path remained. Fresh food was loaded in first and in huge quantities: eggs, vegetables, fruit, meat. Eggs might be stacked carefully in racks or crammed into every safe spot. Fruits and vegetables were tucked wherever they fit, sometimes even hanging in netting, squeezed into corners, or stored between equipment. Fresh provisions were eaten first because spoilage was inevitable. After a short period, days, sometimes a couple of weeks, fresh food began to disappear, and the crew transitioned to canned goods and preserved rations. As for drinks, submarines carried tea, coffee, cocoa, juices, and milk. But nothing about the situation was normal. Everything had to be rationed and managed, and nothing was ever truly refreshing when the air around you smelled of diesel fuel and sweat. Now let's talk about comfort, because on a U-boat the word almost doesn't apply. The interiors were such that it was impossible to speak of comfort, even relative comfort. The boat was designed for war, for machinery, for torpedoes and engines, not for human beings. When the submarine was on the surface in a storm, water constantly entered through the open conning tower hatches. Spray and rain found their way inside, soaking equipment and clothing. And when the boat was submerged, another problem appeared. Because of the temperature difference between the warm air inside and the cold seawater outside, condensation collected on the compartment walls, dripping down like a permanent indoor rain. You could touch a bulkhead and feel it wet. Bedding felt damp, clothes felt damp, everything felt damp. In warm waters, poor ventilation made the air inside heat up severely. A temperature of 122 degrees Fahrenheit in the engine room was considered normal. Imagine working near loud machinery in that heat, breathing air that had already been breathed by dozens of other men. And there were no shower rooms on submarines. The result? Crowding, heat, constant moisture, and no real ability to wash properly. This was because most of the submarine's internal volume was taken up by engines, electric motors, batteries, pipes, valves, compressors, and mechanical systems. Very little space was left for people. Even moving through the boat could be difficult. Men had to squeeze past each other in narrow passages, sometimes turning sideways, sometimes stepping over stored supplies, all while the submarine rocked and shuddered. One of the biggest daily problems was sleeping. There was a chronic shortage of bunks. Sailors slept wherever they could, any place where they could stretch out full length, even on a torpedo or on the deck near equipment. The system was often hot-bunking, two sailors sharing one bunk in shifts, not sleeping together but taking turns. One man would crawl out and another would crawl in, sometimes while the bedding was still warm. Only the commander enjoyed a certain comfort. He was the only crew member with his own apartment, a single-person cabin. But even that cabin was so small that it could barely fit a bed and a table. And it wasn't a quiet refuge either. His cabin was located near the control room, where activity never truly stopped. On a submarine, silence could mean danger, so the boat always felt alert, always listening, always working. Officers' cabins were typically two-man compartments with fold-down bunks. Chief petty officers slept on benches. Ordinary submariners slept in hammocks, on spare mattresses, or anywhere they could find space. And the worst sleeping areas were in the bow and stern sections, exactly where the noise level was highest and where the boat's movement could be felt most sharply. Fresh water was always in short supply, which created serious hygiene problems. Washing was minimal, shaving became optional, even difficult. Many submariners returned from patrols bearded, not for style, but because water was too precious to waste. German chemists did manage to develop a special soap that kept its cleaning properties in seawater, but few men used it for shaving, because shaving with limited water, in bad light, in cramped conditions, was another risk and another discomfort. And then there was the toilet situation. A typical submarine had two toilets, but early in a patrol, one was often used as a storage space space for provisions. Imagine opening a toilet door and finding it packed with food supplies. As a result, a crew of about 50 men was often left with only one toilet. It's easy to imagine how inconvenient that was, especially during long weeks at sea when stress, diet changes, and stale air didn't exactly help anyone's health. The harshest conditions were in the engine room. German submarines had powerful diesel engines about 6 meters long. When running, the diesels produced an incredible noise and intense vibration. The sound wasn't just loud, it was constant, physical, and exhausting. Over time, many men who worked there suffered hearing damage. Add to that the heat, the smell of fuel and oil, and the tight space, and you get one of the most punishing working environments on the entire boat. The galley, like the rest of the submarine, was far from spacious. In a tiny area, the crew had to fit 2 electric stoves and a small work surface, basically a modest table. Cooking itself was a challenge. When the submarine was on the surface, it was often impossible to cook hot food because of rolling and pitching. Pots could slide, boiling water could spill, and a single accident could injure someone. So cooks tried to prepare meals when the boat was submerged and more stable. Even then, the smells of cooking mixed with everything else inside the boat, sometimes a welcome distraction, sometimes just another layer in the scent of submarine life. After several weeks at sea, the air inside the compartments turned into a strange cocktail. Leftover atmospheric air, diesel fuel vapors, sweat, and human waste. And there was one solution sailors used constantly: cologne. Cologne was poured everywhere to reduce the stench. On clothing, on bedding, sometimes even on the walls. It didn't remove the smell, it fought it with another smell. So the submarine became not just a machine of war, but a sealed metal container of sweat, fuel, and cheap perfume. To keep morale from collapsing in such conditions, commanders often organized small competitions and activities that were possible in tight spaces, anything to distract the crew's mind from discomfort and fear. And the most valuable prize was often the simplest thing: the chance to breathe fresh air, an extra watch on the bridge. Imagine that, fresh air as a reward. But considering the atmosphere inside, it truly was priceless. The hardships of submarine service were still compensated in certain ways. Submariners received higher pay and faster promotion in rank and position. There was also another important advantage. After a long patrol, often those same 12 weeks, when the submarine returned to base, only a small part of the crew stayed aboard. The rest, sometimes at least half the crew, received a 12-day leave. During the time the submarine was in port, the entire crew would get their turn at leave. Sailors were even transported home to Germany on special express trains. This meant that even during the war, submariners could spend 2 weeks at home roughly every 6 months. While on the Eastern Front, soldiers often went without leave for 18 months. But here is the harsh truth: all of these benefits came with an enormous price. Submarine warfare was among the deadliest forms of service in the entire German military. To conclude this video, I want to share the lost statistics of Germany's submarine fleet. Out of 40,000 German submariners, most were killed during the war, 30,000 men. That's all for today. If you enjoyed the video, please support it with a like and subscribe to the channel. Bye everyone, see you next time.